Afrobarometer. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for starting the recording. Yeah. Yesterday, we were introduced to Afrobarometer and we got some history and mission when they started. It's been some years now, 1999 to now. You see, they've come a long way, almost over 25, 26 years now. So it means that they have a great deal of data sets, a great deal of knowledge in terms of surveying to get the right data that will help our research trajectory, as I said. And so today we are going to dive into the real data wranglings. So without wasting time, I'll hang the mantle over to Mr. Kamal Yakubu. Kamal Yakubu, please, you have the platform to begin your task for us today.
All right. Thank you so much. God bless. Let me just share my screen. And just a disclaimer. Wait, can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, I
And
can.
can you see the PowerPoint?
I see now.
All right.
No? Okay, yeah, yeah. It's now here. It's not coming. Yeah.
Okay, let me just okay.
I believe we can see now.
Yes, that's good. Yes, welcome folks. And to start us off, there's a disclaimer. God bless you mentioned that we are going to the data wrangling today. So today is not quite the data wrangling, but today is, I guess the eyeballing of the data. So today is when you make you kind of make an idea of the data, and then our next session will go into the data wrangling. And so I just
Okay,
wanted to
okay, okay.
present that disclaimer.
Yeah.
So I
Just
think,
want to
sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to whet the appetite of members.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, thank
Understood.
you. So you have the floor. Continue.
Yes, yes, so the data, so that's the final, input. The endpoint is the data that you access and, you analyze and, you report on. But before the data is, before we have the data, we have to develop instruments to collect the data. And the first kind of thing you have to do when you're setting up a survey instrument is to develop the questionnaire. And my colleague Dominique spoke to you and showed you some videos about the questionnaire. So today, the first task is that we'll take a deep dive into the questionnaire, the Ghana Round 10 questionnaire specifically. And then afterwards, we'll talk about, the other side of instrumentation. That is, how do you know whether the data you are collecting is representative of the people that you want to collect data on? So then we'll talk about our sampling methodology. So for the first part is the questionnaire. And, as Dominique mentioned yesterday, Afrobarometer, we have been collecting data for, 11 rounds now. And, while we have, a bread basket of data that we have been collecting since our inception, we also have, special topics, as Dominique illustrated yesterday, and we also have country-specific questionnaires. But also, in addition, we also receive suggestions from interested stakeholders on a rolling basis. So, we are still, fine-tuning, how we do things. But for now, if you have any question suggestions or, themes or specific things that you'd like to see in the data set, you can send an email or a suggestion to the emails that I've shared, and we'll share the PowerPoint as well so that you can have it for a reference. And how it works is that the questionnaire committee will meet at the beginning of each survey round, and then they'll deliberate. Because the thing with also setting up a questionnaire is that you don't want to make people bored, right? When people are responding to your questionnaire, you want them to give you their full attention. So the questionnaire can't be you can't ask all the questions in the world. There's a limited space, and there's many competing interests and sometimes also theoretical interests. So The questionnaire committee meets and they spend quite a bit of time deliberating on the kind of questions to include in the questionnaire or not. And so about 2/3 of the questionnaire remains the same for tracking purposes. And then the national partners have a list of up to 5 questions on topical issues in their countries. And later on, I'll show you the topical issues in the Ghana questionnaire. So we went through this yesterday, some of the topics that we've tracked through time. It's on the economy, democracy, elections. And as you saw yesterday in the documentary, when the founders started Afrobarometer, it was about political and economic reform. So I want you to also keep that in your minds that yes, maybe historically the data has been associated with political reform mostly on democracy and political participation, etc. However, the goal was really political and economic reform in Africa. So we have items like poverty, infrastructure, media, intolerance, inclusion, etc. And some of the special topics we've done, we went through that yesterday, but it's gender equality and gender-based violence, COVID-19, police professionalism is a big issue in Ghana as well as in other parts of the continent, globalism, China in Africa, I think that's perhaps relevant to some of you, and migration, trade and open borders as well, and taxation. For the new modules in round 11, Dominique shared this yesterday, so I won't waste too much time on it. But also, I would like to point out, some of the, modules that are not necessarily economic, international relations, populism, inclusion, climate change, and gender are not necessarily political topics. So another important element with the questionnaire development, as you know, many even in Ghana, many people don't necessarily speak English. It's not their first language. So we go through a process of, making sure that our questionnaire is translated in the language in which our respondents speak, so that we get their genuine opinions and valid and reliable perspectives. So in terms of, I don't want to go into the weeds of this because, you are more interested in using the data, not necessarily constructing questionnaires, but we go through what we call forward translation. So once the questionnaire is, settled on, we, translate it into, we find translators, independent translators, and it's translated into local language. And then, we synchronize that. And then it's, we draft that questionnaire in the local language, and then we have another translator also translate it back into English from the local language so that we have some kind of consistency. In this slide, I have translations in Zambia. However, in Ghana, the languages, and I'll show you later on, but the languages that the questionnaire is translated in are we have Akan, Ewe, Ga, Dagbani, and Dagari. Those are the languages, the main languages that the questionnaire is translated into. So now let me leave the PowerPoint and then go online and show you how to access the Ghana dataset. So if you go to, let me start with Google or your browser of choice. If you go to Google and you just type in Afrobarometer, can you see my screen, please?
Yeah.
All right. So you type Afrobarometer, you go to our website, our landing page, and let's start by going to countries. So if you go to countries, you can see details of all the countries that we've surveyed, and you go to Ghana, and you have some, descriptive and summary of what Afrobarometer has done in Ghana. So as you can see, we've completed surveys in Ghana for all the rounds from 1999. And the surveys, as I said earlier on, are conducted in Akan, English, Ewe, Ga, Dagbani, and Dagari. And they are managed by CDD Ghana, as you saw in the video yesterday. And these are the key stats from the latest round about Ghana. 90% of Ghanaians have electricity connected to their homes, and 75% say power is available all or most of the time. And 62% of Ghanaians also say the government should ensure universal access to adequate healthcare, even if that means raising taxes. And similarly, 82% of citizens say the media should constantly investigate and report on government mistakes and corruption. And these are all our publications on Ghana as well. So you can also track what's in the Afrobarometer data and the kind of work that you can do with Afrobarometer data by looking at the publications. And, just from these three publications, recent publications on Ghana, you can see that, Afrobarometer has been used, to bugger or not, more young Ghanaians consider immigrating in search of economic opportunity. Once again, I would like to highlight that migration is not necessarily, it's a political issue. However, it's also a social science and economics issue. Ghanaians support women's autonomy, but are divided on abortion and contraceptives, so these are some other items in our, data set. And this is, not necessarily it's political, but it's also on gender. And Ghanaians lack trust in courts. We consider other dispute resolution avenues. These are all some of the work that has been done on Ghana. So, the point of this exercise was to show you the questionnaire, right? So if you're looking for the questionnaire, you go to surveys and you go to questionnaires. And I'm looking for, Ghana, you can search here, or you can actually just look for the country and then click on that. And here we have the Ghana Round 10 questionnaire. So I'll just entreat you to follow me now. Maybe in your free time, you can also download the questionnaire and have a look at it. So I'm downloading the Ghana questionnaire, and then I'll just walk you through it and how it looks like. So I won't go into too much detail on the first section of the questionnaire. This is for basically the field workers, and it shows you, the provinces. I had to, as you know, we used to have 10 regions, and now we have 16 regions, and it took me a while to get my head around that. But we also survey all 16 regions. And, so all of these items are for, the field workers, so the questions with the EASBC, so these are field workers actually, noting actually, let me zoom in. So are the following services present in the primary sampling unit / enumeration area? So this is basically not respondents responding to the questionnaire, but the field workers who are perhaps going to, if they're coming to survey Mampong or survey Ho or Tamale, they go there and then they note whether there's an electricity grid there that most houses can access. Is there pipe water there? Is there mobile phone service? Is there borehole or a tube well? And all these can also be used as some kind of economic indicators. Similarly, are the following facilities present in the PSU? We have issues with amenities sometimes in Africa, so the field workers also note whether there was a health clinic there, or, whether there was a bank ATM, whether there's a social center, is there a police station, etc. So all of these are about the EA, so the questionnaire and the field workers, and the questionnaire actually starts from here, right? So this is, it starts from here because these are the questions responded to by the respondent, right? So some of the questions, the items are, your age, the respondent's age, the language that's spoken there, and then, this is where it starts from. So one of the first items is, let's start with your general view about the current direction of our country. Some people might think the country is going in the wrong direction. Others may feel it is going in the right direction. So let me ask you about the overall direction of the country. Would you say that the country is going in the wrong or right direction? So this is how, so the field worker will read out the question and then they'll note down the responses. And as you can see, the responses are, we have the response categories, and then we also have a number that's assigned to the response category in the data set. You see in the data set, it translates all these response categories into numbers so that you can analyze it using some statistical methods. So this process is called binning. So like a bin, B-I-N, NING. So respondents that said the country is going the wrong direction would then in the data set be coded as 1. And the respondents that said the country is going the right direction in the data set will be coded as 2. And our don't know label is usually 9. And you'll see throughout our data set in the questionnaire, you'll see that the number 9 is assigned to don't knows for most of the items. Though you have some items that have different don't know categorizations, like the first question on the language that you speak at home. So I wanted to, show you this. So the questionnaire is quite long and dense. I won't go through all the items, but let me take you to the country-specific questionnaires, country-specific items, actually. That's usually at the end of the questionnaire. So you scroll all the way. So these are questions that are not asked in Ghana. So interviewers' home language, these are question 1.1 was not asked in Ghana. And you can see signature. So I'm just looking for the country-specific questions. Oh, I can't find them. Let me see. Not asked in Ghana. Yes, so the country-specific questions, you'll see on the questionnaire that they all have like GHA, right? So this item, all the items in the questionnaire that have a GHA label were asked only in Ghana, right? So for example, for round 11, please tell me whether you agree or disagree with the following statements. Regardless of which party wins the 2024 national elections, the next government should continue to implement the following initiatives, or have you not heard enough about them to say? And, so the free senior high school program, the one district, one factory initiative, the planting or rearing for food and jobs initiatives, the electronic levy, the one village, one dam initiative. And you can see all these items pertain only to Ghana. So another thing I wanted to point out to you, especially those who are going to be analyzing the data, is that you can see we have different, in terms of survey analysis, we have different types of questions that can be asked. This question is what we call traditionally it's a Likert scale. A Likert scale is an item that has like a neutral category. So in this case, we have a Likert scale with 5 categories with a neutral category on, whether you neither agree nor disagree. And that's like the middle category. And, so we treat it as we won't go too much into it, but when you're doing survey data analysis, you can deploy something like an OLS regression or a logistic regression because we assume that these Likert scales and these number orderings are continuous variables. So we assume that they are continuous variables in a strict sense for you to be able to use a linear model to estimate, in terms of linear regression. So that's one thing I wanted to point out, so that's the Likert scale question type. And then we also have rating scales and a rating scale. For example, which one's a rating scale? Let's see. Yes, so this question was also only asked in Ghana. Let's talk about your vote in the upcoming December 2024 general elections. As a voter, please tell me how much your choice of political party or candidates will be influenced by the following. Honesty and integrity of the candidate. So this is a rating scale. So it's not at all. That's one category, a little, a lot. And, will not vote. That's coded as a 3. And do not know is coded as a 9. But if you exclude these 2 categories and you only focus on these rating categorizations, you can now assume that 0, like low values on this question, correspond to not at all, and then high values on this question also correspond to a lot. So then you can based on that assumption, so you can then go ahead and do a linear regression model. But it's not a continuous variable in the strict sense. And then we also have items that are, I think the first question in the data set, in the questionnaire, sorry, was this question about the country moving in the right or wrong direction. It was a category, right? It was just a question and it had two categories, one and two. So those are the main three question types that we have. We have questions like this that give you two categories, and we have questions on rating scales, and we have questions on Likert scales with a neutral value, right? So now let me go back to the PowerPoint. I've showed you a bit about the Afrobarometer website, so now are there any questions so far on the questionnaire? On the translation and how the questionnaire is binned, etc. If there are any questions, please let me know, and then let's answer that before we actually go into Afrobarometer's sampling methodology. Any questions? All right. If there are no questions, then I'll go ahead. So our sampling methodology, Afrobarometer's sampling and methodology. When you think about nationally representative surveys around the world, the Afrobarometer is perhaps the most prominent nationally representative survey in Africa. However, in the USA, you have Gallup also doing nationally representative surveys, and Gallup polls 1,000 respondents per national poll. So it's 1,000 respondents per Gallup in America. They have 54, 53 states, and Gallup would go to perhaps, let's say, Arizona, or they go to Massachusetts or California, and then they will sample 1,000 respondents from California, and those 1,000 respondents are sampled in a way that they are nationally representative of the state of California. Similarly, Pew Research Center also does lots of research, mainly in America and in Europe. But when they do their research, they collect their nationally representatives data. Their sample size is usually between 2,500 and 3,000 respondents. Similarly, Ipsos also samples between nationally representative data between 2,000 and 3,000 respondents. Harris Poll does between 1,000 and 2,000. World Value Survey does approximately 1,200. Europe, you have the Eurobarometer also doing about 1,500 respondents. You have the European Social Surveys also doing about 1,500 respondents. You have the Latin Barometer Survey also capturing about 1,200 respondents per country. And the LAPOP, the Americas Barometer, also capturing about 1,500 respondents per country. So I wanted to show you this so that you recognize immediately that the sampling strategy and methodology that Afrobarometer follows is consistent with what other nationally representative surveys are doing in the world. So what is sampling? Sampling in plain English is choosing a representative group from a larger population. And by representative, we mean that any analysis or any deduction that you do on the sample that you have selected, you can now infer from the sample into the general population. And we sample because we want to get accurate data without studying everyone. If we didn't sample, it would be almost impossible to find population estimate parameters of people. You'd have to basically go to every house in your country in order to find out, what the population is saying, and that is almost impossible. Even population census include certain kind of estimations. Even with the population census, they do not interview every single person in a territory. And the sampling strategy makes the research more manageable. And, how do you choose your sample? It depends on who you want to study, the questions that you're asking, how you're asking if you're, I think yesterday we also spoke a little bit about face-to-face surveys and mobile phone surveys, and there might also be online-based surveys like we are even doing with our evaluation forms and our registration forms. So that also determines how you sample and the time and money that you have available to you as a researcher. So we do random sampling. So let me actually also show a video. Actually, let me stop sharing and make sure that I'm sharing with the audio on. Share. Share with the sound. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. It seems like it's frozen on my end.
I think it's
Okay, let me share again. Right. Right. So let me go to the Pew Research Center. All right.
So how can a survey of a small group of people measure public opinion of the entire United States? This idea is called random sampling, where instead of talking to everyone in the population, you talk to a group of people who represent the entire population. Of course, if you want to measure what the entire nation thinks, you can't just stand on a street corner and wave people over. That type of haphazard sample would only represent the people near that street corner at that particular time, and you wouldn't get the people that didn't necessarily want to talk with you. A nationally representative survey requires a random sample in which each person in the United States had a chance of selection. Survey researchers have spent decades perfecting methods to draw a truly random sample that includes all ages, all incomes, all ethnic and racial backgrounds, and all political persuasions. We actually use random sampling all the time in everyday life. For example, when you're making soup, if you stir the pot correctly, you don't have to drink the entire pot of soup to know if it needs more salt. Instead, you can just have a spoonful, because each spoonful tastes like the pot of soup overall. That's random sampling. So once you have your random sample, how can you ensure that it actually represents the overall population? A sample could differ from the overall population because some people are more likely than others to take surveys. So pollsters use a standard technique called weighting to adjust for differences. We know the demographic composition of the United States thanks to data from the US Census Bureau. So once we have our sample, we compare the respondents' demographics to the makeup of the whole country. We look at things like age, gender, education, race, and region. Weighting allows us to adjust our survey data so that it matches the general population on these characteristics. So because of random sampling and weighting, we can take something small like a survey sample and use it to describe something much larger, like the attitudes of all US adults.
All right. I hope that video was clear. So another metaphor I would like to share on random sampling is if, for example, you're not feeling well and then you go to the doctor and then they tell you to get some blood work done, and you get the blood work done and then they find out you have malaria. They do not, when you have getting your blood work done, they do not take out all of your blood to see whether you have malaria or not. They just take, usually it's a prick, and from that little sample of blood that they take, they can generalize to find out what's actually going on in your body. That's another idea of on sampling that you can add to this idea of, tasting your soup, whether it has salt or it doesn't have salt in it. There's also a sampling size calculator. Let me illustrate this for you as well. So for example, in this chart, if we on the vertical line, we have what we call the margin of error, and on the horizontal line, we have what the sample size. And as you can see, if you in terms of the methodology that we use, if you draw a sample of about 1,200, your margin of error is about 3%. And if you draw a sample of, let's say, 9,000, your margin of error is about 1.8%. So the trade-off between your margin of error in terms of your estimation and your sample size, the higher you go after 2,000 cases, it kind of flattens out. So that's why most survey companies, like I mentioned earlier, like Gallup, like Pew Research, and Afrobarometer, we collect sample sizes between 1,000 and 3,000 respondents. So this is another nice API or app that you can use to calculate a sample size. Actually, let's go there. Let me go online and illustrate that to you. So SurveyMonkey sample size. And so I'll be introducing another indicator. We spoke about, the earlier chart that I showed you was about we had margin of error on the vertical axis, and we had the sample on the horizontal axis. In this case, so now we have a margin of error. Now you can also set your confidence level. Afrobarometer is a confidence level of 95. But the whole idea of a confidence level is that, the higher you go, the more robust, and your estimation is. But the traditional confidence level that most survey organizations use is 95. If you are in the natural sciences and you're doing physics or chemistry or something or pharmacy, that confidence level moves to 99. And then the margin of error, if you take a confidence level of 95, then the margin of error is 5%. If you take a confidence level of 99, the margin of error is usually 1%. So you can see for a population size, let's say, I don't know how many, let's say Ghana's population is 30 million. Actually, it's probably 35 million now, right? So if Ghana's population is 35 million from the, Ghana Statistical Services, if that's the estimate from the last population census that they did, and you want to draw a sample, and you want to be 99% confident of the estimations that you can make from the sample with a margin of error of 1, then you have to draw a sample no less than 16,634. However, if your confidence level is 95 and your margin of error is 5%, you only need to sample 385 people across all the 16 regions of Ghana, in a randomized, stratified, multi-stage way. I'll come back to that later on, to be able to make estimations. So as you can see, Afrobarometer, we sample our margin of error is 3%, and our sample size, so it decreases because of the margin of error that we use. Right? So that I just wanted to illustrate the SurveyMonkey sample size calculator, so that to entrench the idea that the sample size, sometimes when you discuss surveys with people, the first critique that they make is that how can you talk about the entire country of Ghana if you're only sampling 2,400 people? However, it's not, the critique to be made there is not about the sample size per se, but it's about the methods that you use. and the way that you actually collect your sample. That is what determines whether the sample is representative of the population or is not representative of the population. It's not about the size, but it's about the method and the way that your sample is collected. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint slide. So our methodology at a glance, we survey only adult citizens, so only Ghanaians that are 18 years and above. And it's usually face-to-face, it's mostly face-to-face interviews, so our flagship survey, as my colleague mentioned yesterday, is face-to-face interviews. However, sometimes we do have special surveys that we conduct using other survey methodologies. So it's face-to-face interviews in the language of the respondent's choice. And we have a standard questionnaire, which allows us to compare across countries and over time. And as we mentioned earlier on, also this standard questionnaire, we have, sometimes special thematic modules and special country-specific questions. And our sample sizes are usually between 1,200 to 2,400 adult citizens, and it yields margins of error of plus or minus 2 to 3%. So another key criteria of our sampling is that we have to reference what we call a sampling frame. And the sampling frame is usually a population census. And so most of the countries that we survey, we have an idea of the current population of the country. So that is what we use to develop our sampling frame and select our enumeration areas, or what we call the primary sampling units. So if a country, for example, DRC hasn't had a population census done in close to 40 years, because they haven't had a population census done in close to 40 years, it's a bit difficult for us to use our traditional methods to sample DRC, because it would be difficult to draw a sampling frame. I think the last survey the last census that was done in DRC was somewhere in the 1970s, and I'm sure you can imagine 1970s Ghana and Ghana in 2026 might be very different countries, and they might have very different population demographics. So the sampling frame is important. And what we do, if you recall from the video that I shared from Pew Research, the lady mentioned that your sample is actually weighted to the population data. So that is in plain language. So the sample is weighted to the population data so that you can actually draw a sample that's representative, or do an analysis that's representative of the population. However, in terms of our weighting, we do what we call a multi-stage stratified clustered randomized area probability sample. I won't go into too much detail here because I do not think it's necessarily relevant for us, but in plain English, we contact this census authority of the country, and then they give us some information about the population of the country, and that is the information that we use to map out our enumeration areas. And once our enumeration areas are mapped out, we use some demographic categories. We have three main demographic categorizations that we use. That's gender, the gender balance in the country, we use the age balance in the country, and we use the regional balance in the country to select the sampling units that our field workers go to administer the survey. So basically, this method allows us to select adult citizens in Ghana or in the territory that we are sampling with an equal and known chance of selection. I won't go into too much detail, but in terms of the Afrobarometer data, like I mentioned earlier on, it's usually 1,200 to 2,400 respondents per country. And when you are reporting on it, you have to think about the margin of error and then the confidence level. And just as an illustration, for example, in 2024, 66% of respondents in Zambia agreed that the country was going in the wrong direction, with a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points at a 95% confidence interval. That is how you generally report some of the indicators that you get from Afrobarometer data. And just to end us off, these are some pictures from the field. I think yesterday the video that Dominique shared had a better effect, showed you the, lens that we go to survey people. And for, we actually go out of our way if our sampling methodology, if the data we get from the statistical bureau tells us and the field workers that we need to interview somebody in a village that is really remote, we do not say that we are not going to go there because the village is remote. We actually go out of our way to actually access every person that our sampling methodology tells us to actually sample. Yes, and if you want to know more about Afrobarometer, I think, I showed you guys earlier on, you can find some material on our website. And for now, I would say that because we haven't gotten into the, the weeds of the data wrangling yet, I would say that maybe just go to the website and have a look at our publications. You can go to the Ghana country profile and have a look at the publications there. And that will tell you an idea of the kind of work that you can do with Afrobarometer data. Thank you. Let me stop sharing now and open the floor for any questions. Any questions?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Amos Soare, a student here in China at the Southwestern University of Finance and Economics. I'm from Liberia. Let me
Nice.
say thank you for yeah. Let me say thank you for such an enriched lecture. But I'm kind of a bit confused. I didn't get when you were trying to navigate through the sample size calculations from the SurveyMonkey website. Can you please go over that again? I beg you, please.
All right, sure. Let me do that.
Okay, thank you.
So let me share my screen again, Amos. Oops. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So this is the sample size calculator from SurveyMonkey. And, I think there are several indicators to keep note of here. We have a population size, we have a confidence level, and we have a margin of error, right? Usually, so this is something that SurveyMonkey has to work on. But usually, for example, we have a confidence level of 95. The margin of error should actually be 5. If the margin of, but SurveyMonkey doesn't really allow you to toggle on this indicator. So usually it's like this because it's a 95% confidence level, and the margin of error has to be 5 because they have to add up to 100. So basically, this basically shows you that if the population, you can input the population of a country or the population of, it doesn't necessarily have to be a country. You could be interested in surveying, let's say you're interested in surveying construction workers in Liberia, and you have an idea from the construction companies that the population of construction workers in Liberia is 1 million, right? So then this would allow you to input in, the population, and then you can also input in your confidence level as well as your margin, the margin of error that you're looking for, and to give you the sample size. It's based on this statistical theory and probability theory behind this app. However, I don't think that's necessarily important for our discussion because you want to use the data. You're not going into the statistical theory. But that's how it basically works. You can select a confidence interval, and then your corresponding margin of error, and then input the population size. And then this SurveyMonkey app will provide the relevant sample size that you need to collect among your population to have a representative sample. And so if, to illustrate again, let's say your population size of construction workers in Liberia, let's say it's 3 million. Why is this? Wait, hold up. Looks like it's, let's say your population for construction workers, let's say is what, 3 million. Then the sample size that you have to collect is that 3 million? That's 3 million. So 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's 3 million. If it's 5 million, you still have to collect 385 sample. Let's say if it's 6 million, still 8 million. That isn't changing, but I think it makes sense because 95, if you change the confidence level to 99, and then the margin of error, let's say is 1, then that's it. The margin of error is 3 at 99%. That's this 95, margin of error 3. And this is around what Afrobarometer does because populations of countries are generally large. So let's say if it's 15 million, then you have to sample about 1,000 respondents to have a 95% confidence and a margin of error of plus or minus 3. Does this illustration help you, Amos?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Amos. Any other questions?
Yeah, let me ask this. In calculating the sample size, as you showed in SurveyMonkey, so are there different methods in calculating the sample size, or there's only one method that you need to use with the factor, the margin of error as probably another variable to control the sample size?
There are so many different methods that statisticians and probability theorists have come up with to calculate sample sizes. I think, but however, what SurveyMonkey uses and what Afrobarometer uses and what Gallup uses is the standardized approach. That's why they have it there. But if you go into the actual theory of it, there's ongoing debates about the sample size calculation, etc. That's why I didn't want to go there. But there isn't a universal standard, but the approach that SurveyMonkey is following, and then the approach that Gallup and Pew and Afrobarometer follows, it all almost always converges into a flattening horizontal, where after 2,000 to 3,000 respondents, your margin of error doesn't necessarily increase or decrease.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. Please, when you get to the SurveyMonkey website, where do you go to get a sample size calculation? By what you said, I think you said standardized approach, sort of the Cochran,
Sorry?
and Yamen, sort of the Cochran and Yamen approach.
Sorry?
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I didn't catch the last.
Yes, I
I
mean
didn't
that
catch your
on the
last sentence.
okay, on the SurveyMonkey website, how do you locate the sample size calculator? Because when you get to the site, the interface is different from what you showed. And how do you locate that sample size calculator? And you said you use the standardized approach. What of if you are going by the Cochran and Yamen approach?
Oh yes, I've heard about the Cochran-Yamen approach. So the Cochran-Yamen approach is, usually I know of it because that's what most people who are collecting primary data in West Africa, I think that's the approach that's is taught, and even with that approach, I think if I recall correctly, it's any any sample above 300, right? So that's also another approach. I do not know whether SurveyMonkey uses that approach, but to get SurveyMonkey's the sample size calculator on SurveyMonkey, I think just Google SurveyMonkey sample size calculator. It will take you directly. You find a link that will take you directly to that website.
Okay, was great.
And please confirm the Cochlear-Yamin approach. Was I right in saying that it basically postulates that if you have a sample size above 300, it's representative of a population?
Yes, depend upon the population size, but yeah, you have a that is it's accurate.
Yes. Any other questions? And just as a caveat, most of the time when we introduce Afrobarometer, these are the kind of questions that come up, about the sample size. But it's useful, yes, and it tells that maybe you're an academic audience. However, in order to use our data, it's almost like once you get a car, then you're looking at the engine, the engine of the car. I'd rather say um, drive the car rather than looking at the engine. If you want to look under the hood, we also have on our website, we have our survey manual that will give you more details about our methodology and how we conduct our surveys. So if you want more information on our sampling approach, you can find more detail on that in our survey manual. But to use our data itself, I would not necessarily advise that you should spend too much time on our sampling. Unless you want to critique our sampling approach, then that's fine. But otherwise, I'd recommend that let's look towards using the data for more policy-oriented stuff than looking under the hood of the data.
Okay, thank you. But not to take you back, yeah, I listened to your comment that it's not that kind of critiquing, but it's just that we have various approaches. So uh, one of the way in scientific community is to know how reliable a particular approach is. And approach you said, I just want to know using the other means could you also arrive at the same time? It's not a way of critiquing. We learn each day and also actually get to know how when you get a data, how you can be able to defend it when maybe you are using the data to at a particular audience and you have to defend the approach you. So that's why
Yes.
as it's not I'm trying to create it. This is an academic environment. So maybe I'm just trying to um, get to know how reliable and how other approaches could help me arrive at the same outcome.
Yes, yes, yes. I completely agree. So I'll recommend you have a look at our survey manual, for more information on, the validity and reliability of our, methodology. Oh, yes. Thank you so much, God bless. I see you shared the sample size calculator.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to say that I hope at least this section has.
To ask one question.
All right, go ahead, please.
On your website, I wanted to know if you have time series data also available on your website.
Sorry, Kamiru, there was some kind of echo when you were saying that.
I wanted to ask if time series data can also be accessed
Oh, okay.
on your website.
So you are trying to find out whether time series can be accessed on our data, right? Is that the question on our website? So thank you so much for the question, Kamiru. So our data is basically cross-sectional. So observational data at various cross sections. So as we said, we do it in various rounds. So our data is not time series per se. However, because we've been collecting data across in some of the same questions across various rounds, you can kind of create a panel and then find a trend and then use some time series methods on those trends. However, I wouldn't advise Afrobarometer is not necessarily amenable to time series analysis, basically because we collect the data every round, that's between 2-year intervals, so from my understanding of time series estimations, sometimes, well, if you're looking at stock markets and stock prices, for example, that's a typical time series estimation approach. And with that one, the stock prices are changing by the minute, so that's why we can use a time series estimation. But in our case, because it's observational and cross-sectional, it's mainly amenable to cross-sectional analysis or some kind of quasi-panel analysis, but also it's not full panel because we do not follow the same respondents over time. If it was proper panel, we basically ask we would ask the same every round. We go back to the same household and the same individual, and that'll be a proper panel. So basically, in terms of statistical analysis, I would say that cross-sectional data analysis is what you can do with Afrobarometer data. And also, just to add to that, because it's not strict time series, you can't necessarily use Afrobarometer data for kind of like forward-looking predictions, like foresight. You can use maybe we can say foresight if it's in a very loose way, but you can't necessarily use it for forward-looking predictions because the time frequency is not as frequent as a stock market indicator.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yeah, so I think maybe next week when we are looking at the online data analysis tool. Actually, wait, let me just go back to the questionnaire. Since there are no questions, there's just something I want to share with you. Since you are Africans in China, actually Ghanaians in China, and we also asked some questions about China, and I personally feel those questions are very underutilized. So given that you are, Africans in China, maybe it would be nice to point you out to show you those questions. How do I? Okay. Yeah. So let me just search for China and have a look at these. This is from the round 10 questionnaire. So the questionnaire, this was fielded in Ghana in 2024, and these are some items on China, right? So we have 4 items on China. First one, let's talk about the influence of other countries in Ghana. How much do you think China's economic activities in Ghana have on our economy? Or haven't you heard enough to say? We have, this is a rating scale. So we have don't know, that's a 9, and then basically higher numbers correspond to more positive feelings, more a stronger perception about China's economic activities influencing Ghana. So a lot would be 3, somewhat is 2, 1 is a little, and 0 is none, right? And that's the first question on China. The second question on China is, do you think that the economic and political influence of each of the following countries or organizations on Ghana is mostly positive, mostly negative, or haven't you heard enough to say? And as you can see, this is a Likert scale. It's got a neutral value, and you can actually compare what Ghanaians think about China's influence, what they think about US's influence, Russia's influence, the African Union's influence or the ECOWAS's influence. I think these might be some items that some of you might be interested in. And also, I'm sure you guys have been in China, maybe even during COVID-19, and you saw probably saw and experienced the narrative about COVID. Then, and this question is related to that. Which of the following countries, organizations, if any, did the most to help Ghana manage the negative impact of COVID-19, or haven't you heard enough to say? And we have a range of countries, including China. And this one also. If you were to move to another country, where would you be most likely to go? And China also, but here in this questionnaire, China is looped in with Asia. So yeah, I wanted to also highlight this for those of you who are maybe doing some research that perhaps involves Africa-China relations, or maybe Ghana-China relations. These are some items that you could perhaps look at to do something with together with some of the other items in Afrobarometer questionnaire, or also some other items from other questionnaires. I for example, just learned that for example, if you want to create a variable that looks at African countries that are maybe coastal countries, countries that are landlocked, and countries that are island countries, you can easily create a variable within the Afrobarometer dataset, or create your own variable that you can triangulate with the Afrobarometer dataset to do some kind of analysis that looks at the differences between respondents in landlocked countries and coastal countries and maybe island countries. So you can also, I'm sharing this example so that you also know that yes, we are introducing you to Afrobarometer. However, your data analysis doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to Afrobarometer alone. You can triangulate it with variables that you make up yourself, like maybe island states, coastal states, landlocked countries, or you can also triangulate it with maybe you can look for a World Bank measure on GDP and then create a variable that groups the countries according to whether they are lower middle income, whether they are middle income, or whether they are low. I don't know what's the World Bank is. You have low middle income, low income. So low income, lower middle income, or middle income countries. I think Africa only has those three countries. So you could also create a variable triangulating World Bank data with Afrobarometer data, or even DHS. DHS has data on maybe anthropometrics. So that is, measuring the body sizes of, people in relation to nutrition. So you can also use Afrobarometer data and triangulate it with DHS data. For example, maybe some of the questions on whether on health that Afrobarometer has, you can create a DHS variable. Afrobarometer asks a question on whether people have medical aid. Perhaps you can use that medical aid question and triangulate it with DHS survey data on anthropometrics to see whether people who do not have medical aid are perhaps more undernourished than those who have medical aid, so forth. So I just wanted to share, at least now that we are looking at the questionnaire, you can start identifying some questions that are of interest to you for your research or your policy work. Any other questions? If there are no questions, maybe I'll take it as a good as a good thing. But I would also encourage you to yeah, especially I've actually been looking for the opportunity to meet with Ghanaians that are in China, because I do think that there's quite a visible impact of Ghanaians in China, in Ghana now. The connection between Ghana and China is growing, and I've been surprised to see. I think I even tell people I know that soon Ghana might have more electric cars than some of the developed countries, the more developed countries on the continent, like South Africa. So I entreat you guys to to think about how you can use Afrobarometer data to talk about the influence of China in Africa or in Ghana. Yes, Jane, I see you have your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for the detailed information regarding data distribution on your platform. Would like to know how we would need to access this data. This data being sold, or one can access them freely on the platform?
You can access it freely on the platform. I don't want to go into the data wrangling now because we will next week's session is about data wrangling. So I'd like to maybe dedicate all of our data queries to next week's session. But our data is publicly available, it's free, and we do not charge you. If you go to our website, we'll show you next week. But if you go to our website and you navigate it, you can go to the datasets section, and then you just download the data, and you can download it and analyze it. I think the downloadable formats are it's a CSV file and a .sav file, so it's SPSS and Excel. However, as you know these days, and I think God bless mentioned yesterday that you have already done some training in R, etc. You can also convert from a .sav file. I think in R you can use I think it's Haven. Is it Haven, or I think you can use Haven to. I've forgotten the exact package, but there are packages available that you can use to convert from Stata to SPSS, etc., or CSV to CSV to R, etc. So our data is accessible, and also we also have merged data sets. So the latest merged data set you can get is round 9, and by merged data set I mean that all the countries that we surveyed in a particular round. So you get a data set that has all 39 countries from round 10 and 37 countries from round 10. I'm sorry, 38 countries from round 10. And then you can now do a cross-comparative inferential analysis as well. So you can download our data per country or also the merged data set.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, if there are no questions, yeah, I'll just say it again. Like I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of this. And hopefully we get some work from this group using the items on China and China's influence in Africa.
Please, I may have one last question.
Okay.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you are looking forward for some works from this group. Does Afrobarometer partner with students, or say, I'd want to use the right word, give grants to students for research work in these areas? Are there opportunities like that for students who are using Afrobarometer? What are the opportunities for students who are using Afrobarometer data?
Okay. Let me answer that shortly. Dominique, are you still on the call? If you are, do you want to answer this? Okay, so I don't think Dominique's on the call yet, still, but we do have so we don't offer grants per se, but we offer incentives for publication, and we'll talk about that during our fourth session. But just a brief summary: if we have we have different types of Afrobarometer publications. We have what we call like an Afrobarometer dispatch. We have an Afrobarometer policy paper, and we have an Afrobarometer working paper. And they all have monetary incentives attached to it. If I recall correctly, a dispatch is $500. I think a policy paper is $750. And the working paper is $1,500. And the hello. And you know the different categorizations of publications depend on the kind of methods that you use. So a dispatch is our advice actually go to our website and then have a look at the different publication types. But a dispatch is basically descriptive analysis. You know, so after next week, when we introduce you to our online data analysis tool, some of the descriptive analysis that you can do with the online data analysis tool, you can use it for a dispatch and a policy paper. Usually, I think there's some. Yeah, a policy paper usually entails some kind of inferential analysis. You know, so you'd have to do like a regression model in addition to your descriptives. And then a working paper is kind of like a peer-reviewed journal article that it will be published under a. Yeah, there's some disturbance on the call. I hope you can hear me. But yes, you know, we'll talk more about that on our fourth session about the, you know, further capacity building opportunities that Afrobarometer offers. But, you know, just to answer you, Jane, we do not offer grants, but we offer incentives for publication. For publication under Afrobarometer's, you know, publication series. However, my advice to you would be to perhaps do an Afrobarometer internal publication and then try and modify that Afrobarometer internal publication for a peer-reviewed journal. So I think that's also entirely possible within academia, where you publish a working paper within an institution, and then you further on develop that working paper into a peer-reviewed publication. And you know that way you can get incentivized for, you know, the work that you are putting in for the working paper. And then once the working paper is, you know, it's done, you can upgrade that working paper into a peer-reviewed publication. I think that's more advisable than just doing a publication for an incentive, especially if you're trying to go the academic route. I hope that answers your question, Jane.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Any other questions, folks? All right, folks, no more questions. Is that a good sign or is that a failure? You tell
Oh,
me.
no. I don't think it's a failure. I don't think it's a failure. Well, probably a lot are waiting for the data wrangling part where they want to get their hands dirty. For example, yesterday I downloaded one of the data, I think the merge data, and I wanted to understand the headings. I realized there are a lot of headings, columns in the data set. So I wanted to understand what each heading meant. But then I said, no, let me wait for the data wrangling as to what each heading is, so that if I want to, you know, do some one or two things with it, I will understand what I'm doing. So I'm sure everybody is waiting for that particular section.
Okay. Yeah, we will get there next week, and hopefully, at least from today, before you get the data, I think always my advice is start from the questionnaire before you even start, because the data represents the questionnaire. You know, so if you can spend time on the questionnaire and you identify questions that you're interested in and look at how it's been, that makes the data wrangling much easier to understand.
Okay, I think that's perfect. Folks, Any question? Any question so that before we call it a
This is
day?
my final question for
It's
today.
not final. Please, if you have 100 questions, ask all of
No,
them.
my final personal final. Yeah.
All right, Jane,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
please.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, um, my question is in relation to Afrobarometer accepting questionnaires or data collected from students or researchers. Is this something that Afrobarometer is open to?
Yes, so I don't mean I don't understand what you mean by data, but
Yeah, so the question,
if it
Mhm.
Mhm.
So for
Please
instance,
clarify.
if a student has developed research questions, has embarked on the data collection processes, is Afrobarometer open to accepting those data to make it a part of their data
Those
set?
data.
Oh no, we don't do that. The reason why we don't do that
Okay.
is because we are not sure of, we like we said earlier on, we go at length to make sure that our sampling and our methodology is robust across different national partners, across the continent. So if you're an independent person collecting data, even if it's you're using Afrobarometer questionnaire to collect your own data, let's say among African students in China, we will not know the methodology that you used. We will not know for even if you tell us that you did random sampling, you did stratified clustering, probability sampling, we do not know, so we will not be able to integrate your data set into our data set base. However, if you develop a research proposal or like, you develop a question that you are trying to take to the field, you can propose it to the questionnaire committee and then they'll consider including it in our next round of surveys.
Thank
I hope
you.
that answers your question, Jane.
Yes, please. I asked this because there was an engagement with UNICEF Ghana, and they mentioned that every data that the students collect, as long as it's in relation to childhood education, early childhood education, they are open to receiving the data sets. So I wanted to know if Afrobarometer also does similar thing.
No, no, we don't do that.
Any more questions? Dr. Dominic, do you have some questions? Elom, do you have any question? Collins, on what we've done so far? Okay, 2 minutes to 8:30. So if we have no questions, then I think we call it a day. Mr. President, can you kindly thank Mr. Kamal for us for such a wonderful job?
All right. Please, I hope I can be heard. Dr. God
Loud and
bless.
clear.
All right, all right, all right. So thank you so much, Dr. God bless. And on behalf of NUGS-China, we want to thank Dr. Kamal Yakub from Afrobarometer for his presence today and leading us through this very informative session. We began yesterday, he was here, and today, together with his colleagues, they've been able to do some wonderful presentation for us. So we want to say a very big thank you, Dr. Kamal. And we are very grateful and waiting for the remaining sessions. We believe that our students are very hungry, as Dr. God bless mentioned earlier. They are waiting to get their hands dirty. So we can't wait for the 2 remaining sessions, which will be coming off on 21st and 22nd of May next week, Thursday and Friday, respectively. And so we are very grateful, Doc. And thank you so much once again. And I also want to thank all of us, NUGS-China members, for making time for this very important session. God richly bless us all.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Please, Dr. Kamal, forgive me. I've been calling you Mr. Kamal, Mr. Kamal. Apologies, please.
No problem. God bless.
Yeah.
And I hope that like I keep saying, like I feel like the items on China in Afrobarometer is underutilized. So I hope that we can get some after this engagement we can get some publications from this group using Afrobarometer data to look at China Africa or China Ghana relationships.
That would be perfect. That would be perfect. I'm hoping that we will go at length to do something like that. My research fanatics, I can see all of you. You are all here. Please, this is an advantage for us. The incentives, we have to target the $1,005 one. Prof. Bruce. Okay, so Dr. Kamal, thank you very much, as my president has said. So we will hope to meet next week, 21st and 22nd. So with that, I will personally say the closing prayer and then we call it a night. We are praying. Father, thank you for such a wonderful evening of an information that is going to shape our research trajectory. It's our prayer that as we sleep, let your angels guide us. When you wake up in the morning, we give thanks to you. Thank you for the presenters and thank you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you everyone for coming. I've been your host for this program. God bless. Mensa is my name. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.